Hello, and welcome to Wrestling with Poetry, Kalamazoo, Michigan's premier wrestling and poetry podcast. Today, poet M.P. Carver, and we'll talk about pro wrestling in Japan. First, M.P. M.P. Carver is a poet and a visual artist from Salem, Massachusetts. She is director of the Massachusetts Poetry Festival, founder of Molecule, a tiny lit mag, and teaches writing at Salem State University. Her work has been published or is forthcoming in Rattle, Mantis, Jubilat, and Love's Executive Order, among others. She has received funding from the Massachusetts Cultural Council and the Essex County Community Foundation. In 2022, her poem, You and God and I, was awarded the New England Poetry Club's E. Cummings Prize. In 2023, her visual poem, In Vitro, was finalist for the Connecticut River Review's Experimental Poetry Contest. Her chapbook, Selachimorpha, was published by Incessant Pipe in 2015. More at mpcarver.com.
Meeting a friend to write at the Starbucks. It's Sunday morning, and instead of writing, I'm on Firefox playing Mr. Mine. The Lord worked hard, then rested on Sunday. I rest every day, so have no poems. Though I'm already at a depth of 1,046 kilometers in this digital world. In fact, I have dug right through the Earth and moved on to the Moon. All it takes is a Google search to learn the actual diameter of the Earth is 12,742 kilometers. Mr. Mine's math may be suspect, but real-world mankind has only made it 12 kilometers deep, so I think I have something to be proud of. Humans reached the moon the lazy way. Anyone can travel the atmosphere. The people milling around me at this coffee shop while I dig deeper but fail to write my poems are expert air travelers 24/7, even on Sundays. Yet here I sit moving through stone. God said to the Israelites on day 1,795,204, And I will remove the heart of stone from your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. I'm fine with what heart and flesh I've got. I'm cutting through, barely needing words. What a world we live in, and all of it, mine. In the parlor of the Blue Collar Language Club. We open our pockets and find our mother's tongues twisted up in the lint. We take them out to compare sharpnesses, admire their dusty hum in the dim room. Back at home, we hang them again to dry like garlic. After all these years, they are still wet. Drop by drop, they drown the house. Later, walking down some foreign street, we catch sight of one through the glare of a stranger's window. Our mouths swell with love.
Thank you, MP. That was fantastic. This week, I'd like to talk about Japanese pro wrestling. How did pro wrestling get its start in Japan? Someone has wanted pro wrestling to be in Japan since the 19th century. And who was this person? Matsuda Sorikichi, a former sumo wrestler. Matsuda visited New York City in 1883, and he dove wholeheartedly into the pro wrestling world. He took on the biggest names in the game. Why? Because he wanted to know his opponent and to learn the skills of this very particular type of wrestling. He was passionate about bringing pro wrestling to Japan. As I understand it, his plan was to make money, develop a reputation, or get famous, and then to return to Japan where he would start a professional wrestling school. Kind of like Little Women, but with wrestling. Did this work out? Well, what he wanted happened, but not in such a way that he could participate in it. People were impressed that he would wrestle men outside his weight class, and for a while, he made a lot of money. He married an American woman with whom he would lavishly entertain people, but they were a tumultuous couple. They would often break up, fight, threaten to kill each other, and then get back together passionately. The high life is not for everyone. Time went on, and Matsuda took some major hits. For example, he got his leg broken by Evan the Strangler Lewis, and he didn't let his leg heal properly and went back into the wrestling ring 1 month later. So, no self-care for Matsuda. It's worth noting that the mats that these guys wrestled on were filthy. It was common to get infectious cuts from slamming onto the mats. Matter of fact, the reason Gorgeous George had the ring sprayed before his performances was literally to disinfect. He was a man prone to rashes and inflammations. I mentioned the dirty mats because it's linked to Matsuda's decline as a wrestler. His health slowly became destroyed, and his money dwindled. His marriage also failed. He contracted tuberculosis, and at 32 years of age, he died poor. He's buried at Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx if you want to visit his grave. And you could find out more about him on classicwrestlingarticles.wordpress.com, 2013, September 8th. The life of... I'm not going to repeat that. His sobriquet was offensive. It's in the 1950s when pro wrestling in Japan really got started, and this is because of television. Television was the medium. The first big star of Japanese professional wrestling in Japan was a guy named Mitsuhiro Momota, a former sumo wrestler who renamed himself Rikidozan when he entered the pro wrestling circuit. He was born in Korea, and his years of splendor were 1951 to 1963. How did he distinguish himself? By defeating Western opponents. After World War II, I'm sure you can imagine that Japan was traumatized, and at least in some areas occupied by Americans. Marshall Plan. Therefore, to stage a wrestling match where the Japanese wrestler defeats the American occupier was a crowd favorite. Japanese wrestlers Momota and his tag team partner Masahiko Kimura defeated the Canadian Sharp brothers in 1954, and that made Momota and Kimura locally famous. 4 years later, on his own, Rikidozan defeated Lou Thez for the NWA National Wrestling Alliance International Heavyweight Championship, and this was on August 27th, 1958, and it happened in Japan. Yes, Michigan native Lou Thez was and still is considered one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. So for Rikidozan to defeat him was a very big deal internationally. This win made Rikidozan extremely famous and wealthy for a while. He developed fans and engaged in high-risk behaviors. He got into a fight with a Yakuza thug and was stabbed. They say his wound wasn't so bad, but he didn't listen to the doctor and he drank a lot of alcohol and didn't rest, so he developed peritonitis, which is an inflammation of the stomach lining, and he died 1 week after getting stabbed. By this time, there were other wrestlers for people to know. You had Antonio Inoki, for instance, the Giant Baba, and those are just two. So, as I was saying, Japanese wrestling matches were mostly viewed on television. Nippon TV had massive screens in Tokyo on which wrestling was broadcast. I do not know if these were indoor or outdoor screens, but the point is that pro wrestling, aka Pro Resu in Japan, developed a following once there were Japanese wrestling heroes, like Rikidozan, who could defeat the unpredictable foreigners. Just like in the US, wrestling in Japan was popular in the 50s and in the 60s, but declined in the 70s and 80s. For some reason, the 70s and 80s, people wanted, I'm putting this in quotes here, authenticity. And the fact that wrestling is a performance and not like a straight up contest, like with dull people and clubs, that just people didn't care for it. Anyway, so there was a decline. The function of the foreign or the alien in Japanese wrestling is to prop up the hometown wrestlers. The term for a foreigner or an alien in Japanese is gaijin. It would become a rite of passage for many North American upcoming wrestlers to spend some time in Japan. Actually, in all the Americas, it was desirable to go to Japan. This is because they could get valuable experience and develop their own followings. Not everyone hated the Gaijin. Andre the Giant made his international reputation in Japan, and people loved him there, as did these wrestlers. Sting, Hulk Hogan, Bret the Hitman Hart, Mick Foley, Sabu, Awesome Kong, Mercedes Moné, Brock Lesnar, and Samoa Joe. If you want to find out more or see for yourself, check out All Japan Pro Wrestling. There's an extensive page. And there's also World Wonder Ring Stardom, which is Joshi wrestling. That just means girl wrestling. There's also Dragon Gate, which I believe is independent. There are many, many wrestling promotions in Japan. And you could check the list of professional wrestling promotions on the Wikipedia if you want the complete list. I'm sure there's more to say, I just don't have the energy to say it. If you're like me, you might be experiencing kind of like a lag in energy because of the holidays. Michigan is a very non-sunny state in the winter. I think it's noted as one of the darkest states in the U.S. Questions, suggestions, concerns, you could just email us at wrestlingwithpoetry@gmail.com, and I would appreciate it. I'll do my best to clarify if I can. Events this week. Probably there is an open mic at Satellite Records. And if there is going to be one, it will be on Thursday at 5:30 p.m. I'm saying probably because last week there wasn't one and I went and nobody was there, so it was weird. Anyway, Satellite Records open mic is usually pretty reliable, and it's at 5:30 p.m. on Thursday. And that location is 808 South Westnedge Avenue, and that's in Kalamazoo. Anyway, I hope you're taking care of yourself during this holiday season. I hope you're good to yourself so that you could enjoy the care of others. Have a good time, and we'll meet up again in 2024.